Welcome to Adapt Now, the ABB podcast series on adaptive execution. Hi, this is Dan Overly here with another edition of Adapt Now podcast series with a number of topics around the ABB Adaptive Execution methodology and the technologies and enablers that allow for it. Today we have Roy Tanner from ABB. From the Control Systems Platform Group. And he's with us today. Roy, hello. Hi.
Well, hello. How are you doing?
I'm good. Thanks for joining us. Just to get started, maybe you can tell the audience a little bit about yourself.
All right. Yeah, my name is Roy Tanner. I'm with the PCP group, as you said, which for that group, I do the Director of Marketing for System 800 XA, which the XA stands for Extended Automation, which is our premier DCS offering.
Okay, excellent. Well, today's topic is around the commissioning side of the ABB Adaptive process flow. And there are several new tools, what we call smart commissioning. And you've been involved with the evolution of that. Maybe you can give us some background of what was the traditional approach to commissioning and how was that done in the past?
Yeah, in my past, I actually was a controls engineer, and I got hired by this company to come and do a commissioning effort at that time. They just built a brand new plant from the ground up, and I joined this company, and they were right in the middle of just starting up this commissioning effort. So it was a really good example of what went on in this realm. This was for an automotive tier 1 supplier. Mm-hmm. So that when you have automotive, it's all about the quick and the dead. You have to kind of basically meet deadlines, be there with products and things, or else they're going to go find somebody else. And so really that deadline is everything. So when I arrived, there was a big rush to get started, get this material made. We actually made propellant for the airbag industry. So to get these airbags completed and ready to be put into automotive, there was a chemical process in the beginning for this propellant, and that's where we used the DCS and other controls equipment. So as a controls engineer, I was there, and what happened was I was there sitting, waiting for the equipment to be ready. And that's typically what you'd find is right at the end, the automation is that last line of defense before you get up and running for production. So you're always waiting for the equipment has to be ready, everything has to be wired up and checked out. So we were waiting and waiting and waiting. So that deadline was creeping up on us. So our window for the controls and automation portion was shrinking. And that's typically what happens. And how do you combat that? When the equipment was finally ready, how do we get going on things? We noticed very quickly that we're not going to meet our deadline if we keep going the way we were going. So what did we have to do? We had to hire more people. So we actually hired contractors and more project managers and technicians to make sure we meet the deadline. And that seems to be the kind of typical thing that would happen. And we would do these old-fashioned loop checks where we have walkie-talkies. We have two people, one person in the field, one person at the control board in the control room in front of the HMI, trying to ring through things, and just a lot of delays and just kind of crunching through spreadsheets and lists of devices that have to be loop checked. Mm-hmm. So that's typically how things would go in a project. I think that's normally the way things were done in the past.
Yeah, and that methodology, I mean, what sort of scenarios was it? The pitfalls of that methodology is just unpredictability. Cost overruns would occur. What would happen in that?
Well, that was a cost, yeah, because we had to hire more people, right? So The first thing you had is because in our case we had to meet the deadline. So maybe in other cases you missed the deadline because it's going to take more time. But there's just unforeseen things where we couldn't get started before the control system had to be delivered. You had to wire it up to the equipment. But if the equipment was delayed and there was still welding out in the field, to get these things in order and make sure the cable trays were up, you couldn't really do anything. So that schedule was kind of pushed back. But the deadline never moved, of course, right? So it just means the window for automation to get checked out and everything else was less and less. So really the constraint and the problem was that's a typical project thing, and you have to do something to curb that. Either move your deadline or you're going to throw money at it. Mm-hmm. And that's usually where the cost overruns come in.
Okay, then I guess back then and between then and now, what drove that need for change and a new way of doing it?
Well, I think after, over time, I think some of the large oil and gas majors that have a lot of these projects, they might have, who knows, hundreds of projects going on at one time, all dealing with this issue. And these cost overruns and change orders and changes in the field and how they impact things. And a lot of those things were happening. Finally, some of the companies kind of stood up and said, well, hold on here, after 30 years. And if you think about the time, it was quite a few years ago. I have 30 years in the industry, and that was about, one of my first jobs. And so that was a long time ago. And if you think about how things are done in the last 10 or 20 years, I mean, it hasn't changed. It's exactly the same. And finally, this company kind of stood up and said, well, hold on here. You telling me you got all these smart transmitters. We have all these amazing applications and tools that are helping us with the EPC work and other items. And all of that together, everything's there someplace in technology. Why doesn't this just happen? Right. And I think that was the term that ExxonMobil used, actually. It should just happen. It should auto sense that instrument. It's a smart instrument. It should be intelligent enough to figure out that it's hooked up to a control system, or your control system's intelligent enough to tell there's a device there, and go look for the information someplace in a database to populate that with the right parameters. And so it just kind of went again and again with these large oil and gas majors were typically the drivers, and kind of said, enough is enough. Everything's out there. Why aren't we why are we doing projects the same way that we did 30 years ago? Mm. And so that's really kind of spawned this whole thing.
So what then do you call this phase of the project? Or what are the tools called? And is this, I've heard the term smart commissioning. Is that what you are referencing now as the new way?
Yeah, I think now. I mean, before, I think it was just either you loop checks or commissioning of the equipment and things. So now I think smart commissioning is taking over, because there's so many technology advances that are out there. Now we can do some damage now, right, with this whole process. So smart commissioning is kind of taken that view of, now we have all that information available. Let's make some use of it. And now we can do things a lot smarter.
How does it work?
More automated. Yeah.
So how does it work?
So what, in some cases, well, think about first, I want to, now with advances in technology, we've kind of split the tasks. So if you think about the way we used to do things, remember I said we had to wait for the equipment to come in, or wait for the DCS or the automation cabinets that I had to wire up to and things. I used to have to wait for that. And that usually was one of the last things that would arrive as well in some cases in projects. But now, since we've done a lot of things to split up the hardware and software, so now we can kind of have duplicate tasks going on. So people can do the software on one location, the hardware can be done at a different time and different location. So there's a lot of technology where I have tools now that I can, like say, soft controllers. I don't have to have controllers maybe in the field anymore to access these devices. These devices are on some kind of field bus, like Profinet or some kind of Ethernet bus. So I can plug that in and access all this I/O without having to have a lot of the infrastructure already set up in there. So I have a lot more freedom to do things at different times, and that kind of relieves the pressure, if you will. Mm-hmm. And that's one aspect of it. And then now, because there's a lot of things that it can be done with smart devices, now with a transmitter, for a smart transmitter could be out there. Where before, if I have a transmitter in the field, I got a guy out with a radio. He's got to hook something up to the device. He's got to, put on some clips and feed a signal into it to see if it comes back all the way through the I/O, through the controller into my HMI. Well, like I said, I don't have all that infrastructure, but I do have some tools that I can use to like plug into that I/O and kind of go out and scan that transmitter. And the transmitters are smart enough now where I can feed in some diagnostic data or some values. I can say, you know what, pretend that you're at 50%, so that I can see if it comes all the way through to my operator display or something like that. So I can kind of test things out without having to have the full infrastructure. So, and I can do that with one person. I don't need two people to do that. I can do all that with software now. So that's really what smart devices and smart commissioning can buy you.
I see. Okay, so time eliminated. It just recognizes the device. What about the paper trail that used to go on with?
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, that was one of the biggest tasks in the old days, if you will, was when I did all those checkouts, right? I had to check all that IO out. We all met at the end of the day. We all kind of gave our list back to the project manager that would assemble all these things to see how many we've done for that day, how many we have left to do, and then document that somehow of what checks were done, and then file that away. So that took up a lot of the time to document all that, and not to mention the testing itself during the days and things. So now, since we have this, a lot of this stuff is automated now. So with smart commissioning, a lot of the things can be done automated. Where I say, hey, you know what? It's a smart transmitter. I have, let's say, quite a few of these. So I can do these in bulk. I can say, you know what? All these temperature transmitters have all the same ranges. They have all the same parameters. So let me configure these in bulk. And then, well, I got it hooked up. Why can't you just test yourself and automate it and then record that data and then produce a report? So it kind of automates the whole process of that loop check.
Mm.
It does take into consideration, though, or it does assume that you have a smart device, because that's kind of what you need to do that, to do all that. But there's a lot of HART devices that are being implemented now. For instance, HART is a technology that will allow me to do that.
Mm-hmm. So primary benefit in reduction of time, old way versus new way to commission.
Well, yeah, I mean, it gives you the freedom to, do other things. If you think about, I love multitasking, right? I mean, I love knowing that if I hire somebody to do my lawn, yet I'm going to do this plumbing fix or something. I love knowing that two things are going on at once, right? So I have these, if something can be automated and done that way, that frees up a ton of time. And so that I really shorten that window is for that part of commissioning, that loop checks and all the documentation for that.
What about how prevalent was human error in the past compared to now?
Well, yeah, I think if you think about all these different, stakeholders and all the people involved, if you think about you have some data being input in different areas and then spread around, there's always risk for error, right? Maybe somebody programmed the transmitter, he typed in a wrong number, and also now the number's wrong, and yet I have a database over here, or I have my DCS is already programmed. That's not going to line up. So there's always those kind of problems. And that's a lot of the things that would have to be fixed on that punch list. That was the famous thing we had when we were doing loop checks, is the punch list. So, because remember, all of these checkouts didn't go well. There might be some mistakes in there. Maybe the instrument was programmed wrong. Maybe the DCS tag was wrong. Maybe the label on the wires were wrong. So all of these different sources, if they have different different versions of their own truth, that can cause a lot of problems. So any automation or linking of technology where you have just one single source can reduce a lot of that error and a lot of the mistakes that would also kind of contribute to the rework and time and fixing of things.
So does this procedures and these tools, is that for anyone to use? Do we sell them by themselves, or is it part of the value add that we provide?
Well, there's answers for those, I think, in different ways out there. I know what we do is we have we kind of cater a lot to these large projects that are happening. And this kind of mentality can be done in any size project, but the larger the project and the more multiple projects you have, the more it makes sense to do things like this. And some of these larger projects are doing things like having fabrication yards, or we call it sometimes split staging, where they're going to stage portions of the equipment in a certain location that may be a lot better than the end location. If you think about an oil and gas platform, it'd be nicer to kind of do that more modular based, right? In one location where parts of it can be tested and checked out by themselves. And so what we do is have tools that can kind of go into that environment and do that checkout without having to have the full infrastructure there. So that's a big advantage as well.
So do you see this capability essentially eliminating one of the major tasks of a project, which is the factory acceptance test? Does it help eliminate that and do it on site?
Yeah, I mean if you do it in this extreme way, I guess it can really help do that. You're doing it as needed, right? So you're with the technology you have today, as far as the software applications and simulation, a lot of this is checked out really well
Mhm.
in back in the office, as far as doing some simulation and checkout of the application code to make sure it's going to act the way you think it should act. On the field side, you're checking out all the I/O and the connectivity. You're doing all those functional checks to make sure things are hooked up correctly.
Mhm.
So then when you merge those two together, it's almost there. And now you can do that site acceptance test and some of the checkouts right there on site, and you really eliminated a lot of the the activities and the hours and checkout between those two,
Mhm.
compared to how that traditional serial kind of way of doing projects, the more of a dependent way. So we kind of call that late binding, or one thing we've done because of the System 800XA and its capabilities, we call it extreme engineering, where we can have those multiple work streams. So we kind of say configure, check, connect, right? I'm going to configure the application. I'm going to configure the I/O separately. I'm going to check those two out as much as I possibly can, and then I'm going to connect them together. And we have some tools that kind of just automatically, we call it automatic marshaling, or digital marshaling, that kind of just hooks these things together. They automatic are aware and kind of make the connection behind the scenes in software. So it really kind of accelerates the whole thing, and like that just in time or late binding kind of concept.
So, with all this technology, has there been any pushback of engineers saying, "I still want to verify that this works"? They like doing it. They like getting their hands on it, so to speak.
Yeah,
Um,
of course, any technology, anything automated, you have to trust it,
mhm.
right? So you have to go through this to make sure that things are going to work correctly, make sure that it went in okay. So I think it's one of those things where it's going to come with trust. But remember, there's a lot of non-smart equipment out there and things like that still have to be checked out. So there's always going to be some a human element in there, I think.
Mhm.
But I think the idea is over time is, look at the automatic car driving cars, right? It's a kind of a no-brainer, but it's going to take a long time to get acceptance, and there's rules there, right? So you still want to have some kind of, hands-on. You still want to make sure that that driver is paying attention and things are there. So I just think it's a lot less people, and it's a lot more automated. So I think it
Mhm.
should be, again, a lot more efficient in the end of the day. And I think with time, you'll get a lot more trust. But a lot of the technology has been out there. We're just kind of hooking it together finally, right? And
Mhm.
making use of all that's out there.
Do you see these capabilities making my younger engineers more attracted to process control and the control world in general?
I think so. One thing is you think about young engineers that, do they want to go on site for months at a time away from their families and things?
Hmm.
Probably not. So there are those, road warriors that like to do that, but I think those are fewer and fewer. They want to have a little more control over their destiny, if you will. So I think this allows a lot more people to be enticed to come to our industry.
Yeah.
But I will say that I know that I mean we're talking doing loop checks in startups like this are months and months, right? Of I don't know how many hours. There used to be a competition to see how long you could stay up doing this work, because again there was a deadline.
Mm.
So, and you were getting paid, and you're getting paid well, and overtime and everything else. So it was like a lot of very 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 long days.
Yeah.
And that's not for everybody. So there's just a few people, and even if you do that, you can only do it for so long. So I think it really opens up to be a more conducive environment for any engineers. Um,
Yeah. So I think it certainly makes sense to me that this approach is, from our customers' perspective, less time means less cost to them. Technology reduces risk. Uh, all this keeps the project on schedule. So the benefits are really clear. So just to wrap up here, Roy, ABB Adaptive, this is a key element to the ABB Adaptive Execution methodology. And Do you have anything in the pipeline that you see over the next couple of years? Any other interesting technologies coming out that are really going to help with the project execution?
Yeah, I think I love the whole adaptive scheme because it tells the story of things are going to change. One thing is constant. There's always going to be change or something, or one thing is consistent. And I think to be able to adapt to different project environments and how they work are going to be key. And so we do have a lot of that automated activities is one thing we're paying attention to quite a lot. Those are going to be really good game changers. But we're not, if you think about it, we're starting with the instrumentation and mostly process instrumentation and heart, the actuators and things like that. But there's a lot of electrical equipment and other things there. So what we have coming in this is not only the process equipment, but also the electrification and doing the same kind of late binding kind of activities around the electrification side, because that's a huge part of it. You can't turn on something without power, right? Yeah. So that's I think a really good vision kind of thing is not limiting it to just these, smart transmitters and other things, to open it up to other plant equipment that's there. It's always going to be there.
Excellent. Well, we'll stay tuned for that, Roy, and look forward to reaching out to you in the future. And with that, we'll say goodbye. Thanks for your time. Really appreciate learning more about some of the new tools around commissioning and smart commissioning in the ABB Adaptive world. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.